All right, so we're back. Yours truly back in the space, back in the place. Once again, Mickey Smith Jr. And if you've been watching, this is the last of the 4 behavior videos we talked about. And I'm trying to get this concept across to folks that there really are no behavior problems in your class. There are problem behaviors. Because when we say behavior problems, that oftentimes connotates to the student, like the student is an issue. Okay, and we don't want this thing to become personal. Especially if you go into a teacher conference or you're trying to just deal with that student, we don't want them to feel that we don't value them or like them or appreciate them. You know, it shouldn't be that. At the end of the day, children are going to be childish. But as adults, we have to be adultish. And I'm not perfect. I get frustrated at times, but my job, my role is to always ask myself, okay, the children are being childish. Am I as the adult, am I being adultish? And being adultish comes from being what I call a behavior detective. And equipping yourself with those behavior detective techniques comes from having a systematic approach for seeing and not just looking. Don't just look in your classroom, but see the students that are in it. I use what I call the flight assessment. Anybody that's worked with me when I do my coaching teachers, and I do my consulting, we oftentimes like to give that flight assessment so that you can see who you are in the flight called Flight Sound 180, Flight 180, 180 days. Sometimes we take in flight. Sometimes we hit some turbulence in that school year. But the question is not, do we jump out the plane? No, the question is, okay, who's serving the role that keeps the plane in the air? And look, I'm going to tell you guys this. Look, it was crazy. Not too long ago, I was getting ready to get on my last connection to a place I was going, a small community. And they would not let the flight take off because they couldn't find a flight attendant. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, we don't even need the flight attendant. I'm like, we got the pilot. They got grounds crew, right? We got air traffic control. But they would not let that plane take off unless we had the flight attendant. And I'm sitting up there like, you had to know, the flight was so short. The remaining flight I had, that last leg, was a 45-minute flight, which means we weren't even going to get the pretzels. We weren't even going to get the peanuts. We weren't going to get the things that we associate with the flight attendant. And I'm like, well, they're not even feeding us. What do we need the flight attendant for? But it showed me in that season that every person that's involved in that flight is indispensable. And if we can start seeing our classrooms in that way, that it's not a classroom of, oh, if I just got rid of this kid, we thrive. That all students have a value, but their value is only recognized if it's realized what their role is. So I need you to know the role. We talked about the pilot. We talked about how they have that dominating aura about them, and they can be a little defiant at time and maybe a little deliberate, bullheaded, right? All that kind of stuff. But really, those are the superpowers in disguise. They are incredible leaders that are focused in on problems. You know, they may not be focused in on relational and pouring into people. They are extroverted, but they may not be more people driven as more they are purpose driven or problem driven. These are the people that you want flying the plane. They're going to get it. They're going to get the job done. Get it done. Get her done. That's how they say, right? Just do it, like Nike says. You know, it's about seeing that value. We talk about the flight attendant. You know, that's the person a little bit more. You know, they're more interactive, right? Squirrel, right? They may be a little bit all over the place, but it's that interactiveness and that imaginativeness that actually positions them to be that influencer, to be that visioneer, to be that interactive, that person that actually brings people together and in essence inspires, right? But we have to give them the proper framework to be everything that they can be. That's why I want my flight attendants. I want them with the people, right? It's all about the people. I don't want them in the cockpit, right? And then we talked about our grounds crew and how they're more supportive, right? You know, tell me more, give me more bags, right? Give me more jobs to do. Like they want that. Why? Because they want to ensure that there's a stability. They bring the stableness to the situation. So knowing who they are helps us to know where they should be. And when we talk about group activities, when we talk about just knowing not just how to teach, but how to reach them, that's where that knowledge base comes from. And then finally, we talk about the air traffic control. Air traffic control. These are the people you don't see. They're totally behind the scenes, but incredibly important. I think about 9/11, and I think about, wow, when you think about how air traffic control got all those thousands of planes on the ground in a matter of minutes, Think about how many lives were saved, but think about how much data had to be processed. Think about how many calculations had to be made. These are the people, they are more conscientious, right? These are the students. I mean, these are these conscientious students. Look, I'm gonna go ahead and say it. Maybe sometimes we think the nerd, right? Sometimes we think the nerd, right? Maybe the pocket protector back in the day, the glasses, right? But they're conscientious about their work, right? They're great at making calculations. They're calculating, and not in a negative standpoint, but they make the calculations, right? They're very competent when you think about them. They're very contemplative. Man, they're going to consider these things. Let's consider it. Let's contemplate. If I had wings, I would fly. Let me contemplate. Right. If I could quote the great philosopher Warren G. Regulators, right? Right. They help us regulate because they make sure everything calculates properly. Why am I telling you this? Because their actions are actually calling for values. They need value. If what you're bringing doesn't have pillars of value, they not about it. They like, I'm out. I'm counting out. They need confirmation. Not only do they need to see value and feel value, they need the confirmation. What do I mean by confirmation? They're already calculating. They want to be involved in something that solidifies or backs up what they're thinking. All right. It's got to be in alignment with who they are. Why? Because they're all about excellence. They're about excellence. It's got to be done right. Right? If we're not doing it right. That's not how it's supposed to be. Miss Johnson, that's not what the directions say. Look, we all know that student, right? And sometime if we go into the parent teacher conference, sometime we can say stuff like, well, little Billy's just aloof. And it's not that Billy's aloof. He's what? He's probably contemplating. He's probably thinking. He's probably calculating it up, right? Somebody said, well, he can't, parent, I'm just having a hard time with him. He's not getting his assignments done in time. Why? Because he's overcautious. He's taking so much time doing the work. He's not getting the work done. Somebody said, I have a student that's incredibly critical of others and himself. Why? Because they fall into that air traffic control. And matter of fact, that's actually the superpower, because when I'm flying in the plane, I want somebody that's incredibly critical with that data. I don't want somebody that's like, well, we're just going to feel it. We're going to figure it out. Right. My mother-in-law was nervous about flying somewhere because she was afraid that the pilot may just get a notion to do something. And my wife had to tell my mother-in-law, Mom, that ain't how it worked. Even if that pilot did have an unction to do something, air traffic control is going to be like, no, the data says. We're not doing that. The data says this, all right? The numbers say this. They're very critical, right? And sometimes that can even come off as judgmental, all right? It can come across, even if that's not the child's intention. And sometimes, look, especially if we're not on our game and we haven't done our due diligence, that student, depending on how your classroom structure is set up and if it's open for talk and for speak, they can come across even judgmental or critical to the teacher, which then can take a tone and can take a turn to the wrong place. So we have to be careful, because a lot of times when we talk about these air traffic controllers, we're dealing with what look, in essence, we can call a perfectionist. And we have to be careful with that, because it can take them so long to act or decide. That can be a classroom management problem as well, too. So, we oftentimes don't think of our nerds as being a problem in class, but sometimes we've had a lesson that we just had to move on, and it caused a great deal of dysfunction between the teacher and student relationship. You're like, where is this coming from? I just want them to finish the assignment. I just wanted her to move on. But it was more than that. You were calling out their personal, because they're not even wired to just turn it in. They're wired to get it right. And, their drivers are information and data. That's what gets them up at the end of the day. That's what gets them excited, right? Because they have that need to follow the rules, the value set. Okay, so once you say something is something to an air traffic control, that's law. And it's like, well, why are we not doing that? Well, why are we not doing that? And depending on how your personality is, how your behavior structure is, how your preferences and tendencies are, that can cause conflict if you have not positioned yourself to be a behavior detective. Look, if you got, somebody said, Mickey, what are their, but how do I reach them? Because that's the key at the end of the day. We talk about not just teaching, but reaching. When we talked about the pilot, that motivator was achievement. We talked about the flight attendant. That motivator was communication. Just let them talk. Give them that and when you talk to them, make sure that we have positive communication. Those are true motivators. When we talked about grounds crew, the motivator was don't change it too fast. Give me some time. Give me some time. I need some time, right? I need some time to think about this. But when we talk about air traffic control, what are their motivators? Man, the details, facts. Maybe throw in a documentary with them bad boys. They like the documentaries. Like, you know what I'm saying? They just give them a dictionary. Like, they want some data. They need some empirical data. This is the stuff that gets them excited. And when you're teaching, think about this. When you're teaching and you start throwing out the data, you'll be able to tell real quick who air traffic controls are because they get excited when you give the facts. Right? You know, flight attendants, they may like some fiction. You put a little story to the facts, they like it. That was such a clever story. I'll always remember that, Mr. Smith. But air traffic control, they like, just give me the facts. Just give me the facts. What you don't want to give them is quick action without enough information. So make sure you balance that. But you got to know who you're dealing with. You got to be a student, of the students. Why? Because at the end of the day, they become stressed when they don't have details, when they don't feel like we're taking our due diligence and we're not being cautious of what we're doing. That really throws them for a loop. So you got to know who you are and you have to know who they are in order for y'all to get from point A to point Z together. At the end of the day, be very careful with these students because their greatest fear is the criticism of their work because they take their work so personal. Very, very. And I want you to think back on this. Think about it. If you had that, like I keep saying the nerd, but I shouldn't even say that. That's not politically correct. But when you got that student that really cares deeply about their work and their work is called into question, you've seen it at times. Wow, you maybe get a reaction you had never gotten out of that student before, right? So it has nothing to do with you per se, but it's got everything to do with how they're hardwired. That's why I say it's not our job to change their behavior. It's our job to be detectives of their behavior and put them in the best role possible. Why? Because their value to your classroom, their value to the flight, their value to the team is connecting the plan. That's what they do. Why? Because they know all the details. They can put it together in their language. And their language is being logical, being detail oriented. If you want logic and detail, that's the students you talk to. So I'm telling you this, when we talk about change, because the only certainty is change. Change is coming. We talked about that pilot. How do we address change? How do they address to it? They're quick to adapt as long as they're in control. When change comes across with a flight attendant, how do they handle it? They handle it great, and they appreciate it if they're given choice. If you don't give them choice, then you could be in trouble. What about change with the grounds crew? We talked about it. That they prefer for things to be slow. Okay, we can change, but as long as we see the change coming, right? So when we talk about air traffic control, what are we talking about? We're talking about change, but when we talk about this change, they're going to need a lot of factual, empirical data. They'll make the change as long as you make the case. Come on, somebody, I need you to hear me. They'll make the change as long as you make the case for the change. That's the thing with them. Why? Because the small task is not on their agenda. The small task is not on your agenda. That's if I had to describe them as something, they see the whole thing. They see it. And there's no small task here. Every task is a task and every task is on my agenda. Can I take you through the 12 points? Like that's who they are, right? So you just better know who you're dealing with when you're trying to deal with them in the classroom. Why? Because at the end of the day, just like I said before, this flight doesn't take off unless everybody's there. No child left behind. So how do we achieve that level of no child left behind? It's understanding what they bring. They bring a level of productivity. That's what they want to see. They want to see that things are working. They want to see that things are accounted for. They focus on the procedure. They're big on the process. And as a teacher, if you cannot show and validate process, you're going to have trouble with these students, even though they may be your better academic students. All the more reason you have trouble with them because they want, what is your process? Teacher, what is your process? How are we doing it? Not why are we doing it? Not, are we there yet? It's, hey, I don't even have to be there yet. Give me more about this process. Why? Because quality is important to me. They're more pragmatic, guys. I just need you to hear that. And I need you to understand you can't change them. Your job is not to change them. Your job is to recognize them. They got that pragmatic approach. They're more traditional. They're more cautious. They're more careful. They're not going to make rash decisions. And they're not going to embrace you if you make rash decisions or if you can't be what? Trusted. I need you to be that sound adult. They're not just do it. Theirs is give me the facts. My man says, show me the Carfax. I need you to show me the Carfax. Give me the facts. Show me the facts. If you can show them the facts, then they got your back. That's what you need to know about air traffic control. So we've taken you through the students. I want you to kind of sit back and think about in your classroom, who are those students? Think about the students. Look, let's just be honest. Think about the ones you're having issues with right now. And then go back and watch these videos. And I want you to consider how to best not just teach, but how to reach. Because if you can reach, then you can teach. If you can inspire, then you can instruct. Seek first to invest a level of trust, to instill a level of trust, to show yourself as that trusted adult that actually gets it and sees them. Because trust opens up the door to relationship. From relationship opens up the door to influence. From influence opens up the door to instruction. Modern day teaching is relationship-based teaching. You can't separate it. And to have relationship, you have to be a great detective of the behaviors. To get them, you got to get with them. You got to see them. I hope this is beneficial to you. If it is, find out more on the website. Connect with me. I love to be able to consult in clinic and provide service to you for your professional development, your in-services. That's what it's all about. It's encouraging educators everywhere to keep on going. Educators to executives. We all have a classroom. We all have an ability to teach and both reach. And I take the lessons learned, the lessons taught, the lessons caught in the classroom to help everyone everywhere keep on going with resilience and see the sound of the significance that surrounds them and within them. So, hey, let me know if I can be of service to you. Find out more on the website, MickeySmithJr.com. Keep on going and let us be the sound to change the world. Until next time.